Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post All-Star Game weekend podcast, the first show of the unofficial second half of the season. I want to talk about All-Star weekend. Of course, Timberwolves players Friday, Saturday, Sunday involved throughout the weekend, and a really fun All-Star game, but really overall, outside of the dunk contest, of course, a fantastic weekend of basketball. I want to talk about all that, then take a quick peek at February so far, specifically my original prediction for the month for the Timberwolves, where it sits now, and what I see upcoming here for the Wolves over the next couple of weeks. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Today's episode is brought to us by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy unofficial second half of the NBA season. Of course, we're over 2/3 of the way through the season, but we're past the All-Star break now. We're very quickly going to be in the home stretch of the regular season. There's a lot to talk about here this week. The Wolves don't play again until Thursday, so plenty of time Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to talk about the second half of the season. I want to do a little bit of that today, specifically about the month of February, but I also want to talk about All-Star weekend. This was actually a really fun weekend. Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards playing way back on Friday night. The Rising Stars Challenge, KarlAnthony Towns of the 3-point contest on Saturday. And then also the All-Star Game on Sunday. So I want to talk about all that, kind of the weekend overview, my thoughts on some of this reformatted, some of the different reformatted events this year. So we're going to do that here first on the show before we get to the month of February for the Timberwolves. A quick reminder here off the top, or actually a quick thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube. If you prefer to listen on your favorite audio platform, you can find it anywhere, including Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, our friends at Odyssey. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. That's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, so the most notable thing about All-Star Weekend, of course, was all the new formats. I talked about this a little bit previously on the show, but Friday night, instead of the old rookie-sophomore format, of course, for a while it was rookies versus sophomores, and then it was Team USA versus World. And now this year, it was a pool of, I think it was 28 total NBA rookies and sophomores, so still rookies and sophomores, of course, and then 4 total G League players. So 32 players split into 4 teams of 8, of course, drafted by members of the NBA 75th anniversary team. And Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards were on different teams on opposite sides of the bracket. And this was a 4-team tournament on Friday. So instead of just a regular game, this was semifinal games essentially to 50 and then a championship game to 25. Anthony Edwards only played the first few minutes of his team's game in the first round, and ultimately they won in the first round. Anthony Edwards I think he had a couple of dunks. One was a pretty nice alley-oop dunk that he converted, and his team won on a free throw. It was playing to 50 instead of a timed game, right? It was first team to 50. And then Jaden McDaniels' team ended up losing, both of their teams ended up winning, but Anthony Edwards didn't play in the championship game, if I remember that correctly. But ultimately, Jaden McDaniels was a bit more impressive. And in the championship game, he ended up scoring 12 points on 5 of 10 shooting for his squad. That was the first round game. I mixed these up. Anthony Edwards' team won in the first round on the free throw, but he did not play in the championship game. He played the first few minutes of his game, sat the rest of the first round game, and then did not appear in the championship game. Jaden McDaniels' team was leading for most of it. Team Peyton was beating Team Barry, but then Jaden McDaniels' team ultimately lost 50-48. But Jaden played well. He shot 5 of 10, had 12 points, made a couple of threes in the game, and looked a lot like the Jaden McDaniels we've seen lately, and showed some hops, just was impressive. And Edwards said afterwards that it wasn't him only playing a handful of minutes in the first game and sitting in the championship game wasn't directly related to his ankle. which he, of course, had sprained his left ankle on Tuesday. Didn't play the second half of the Wolves game back on Tuesday, the overtime win. And then he came back and played the next night on Wednesday. So he obviously wasn't too injured if he played the next night and then also appeared in this game. Hard to believe that the Wolves didn't maybe put in a word with the coaching staff for Friday night's game to say, hey, look, let's get him a little bit of extra rest. But, let him start, let him, he got the honor to start in this game. And obviously the fans wanted to see him and he got a dunk in there too. So good to see them both play. I love the format of the 2 games to 50 and then the championship game to 25. I thought that was really effective. It was far more exciting than well, as we've seen, and we'll get to the All-Star game here in a little bit. The All-Star game itself, the so-called the Elam point total instead of the time clock at the end, it obviously causes players to start playing harder sooner in the game. And while the first, until you get to almost 40 points in the Rising Stars games, or at least in the opening round games, guys are treating it like a regular All-Star game, but then it starts to tighten up. There's something about knowing that there's a point total to get to and seeing it get closer versus, oh, we still got 8 minutes on the clock or whatever, that makes guys lock down a little bit more quickly on defense. And so I thought it worked really well. I thought down the stretch, guys were playing defense. There were actually fouls called. I mean, one of the games was won on a free throw. So it was actually really entertaining. And I appreciated how that format was done on Friday. I'll talk generally about the Saturday formats before I get to Karl-Anthony Towns specifically. The skills challenge, I like the idea. And of course, this year, instead of just the obstacle course, essentially, where you have 6 or 8 guys participate. I remember Karl-Anthony Towns won the event back in 2016. It was big men versus guards, and Towns won it for the big men way back when. And then this year, it was 3 teams. It was Team Antetokounmpo, Team Cleveland that had 3 Cleveland Cavaliers players, and then 3 rookies on Team Rookies. And it was a little disjointed because there were multiple, there was the shooting competition, there was the passing competition, there was an obstacle course, and then ultimately the half court shooting. It kind of dragged on a little bit, but I like the idea. So I think with some tweaking, this is a really cool format. And now I don't know what they're going to do for the teams in the future. I don't think Team Antetokounmpo is going to play every year. But maybe you have a team made of host team players like Team Cleveland and maybe a team rookies, and then you come up with a third team every year. But I liked the idea of it, and it was entertaining, certainly. The dunk contest, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. The dunk contest, I mean, you watched it, and if you didn't, you've seen everybody's calling it the worst ever. It's not the worst ever. I mean, go back and watch, what was it, like 2000? It was like 2016, maybe, or 2015. It was like the Sprite Slam Dunk, and it wasn't actually 4 guys taking turns dunking. It was like everybody had like a 2-minute clock to do whatever they wanted within that 2-minute clock, and it was completely outside the box idea, and it did not work at all. That was absolutely the worst one I've ever seen. But this is probably bottom. This is maybe the second worst. It's bottom 2 or 3 in the past 20 years. I don't think it's crazy hyperbole to say it's one of the worst ever. Obi Toppin was legit good. I loved his first dunk behind the back over, I forget who he dunked over, but behind the back was nice. It's a lot like what Levine did, not over somebody in his first dunk contest in Brooklyn, I think it was. But it was very nice. And then his winning dunk was good too. Unfortunately, Toppin just didn't get it. Just everybody was exhausted from everybody else not dunking the ball well, that he didn't get his due. But I mean, really, Toppin was very good. He wasn't outstanding. He was very good, and then everybody else was just not. So, not a lot of fun, and it's so hard to know coming into this thing. Everybody expected Jalen Green to be fantastic, and everybody knows he's got the hops to be fit. Same with Cole Anthony, but they just couldn't get it done. I don't know if it's the bright lights or just whatever. It's tough to know until you actually get out there, and that's the problem with this dunk contest is you can count on one hand the number of truly electric ones we've had in the last 2 decades, right? 2 decades. Obviously, Levine and Aaron Gordon stands out. That was 2016. Levine in 15 was fantastic. Of course, going back, 10 years before that, Vince Carter. Maybe a couple here and there. There's some iconic dunks in there. The Blake Griffin one, obviously. Dwight Howard had some good ones. Nate Robinson was memorable, at least. The Gerald Green and the cupcake on the rim, right? I mean, there are some of those moments, but there's also these years that are just complete duds. And this was a really good example of that. All right. I want to talk about Karl-Anthony Towns, the 3-point shooting contest from Saturday, the broader context of this greatest shooting big man ever. I've talked about this on the show before, but it's a thing again. We're talking about it. I want to give kind of an abbreviated thought on that, and then also talk about Sunday's All-Star game. And then I want to get into February related to the Timberwolves, what they've done so far in the month of February. compared to my prediction and then what they could do here moving forward the last, I guess, week of the month. First of all, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. This is the time of year that we've all pretty much given up on our New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I am going to stick to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution, though, because I actually genuinely, truly enjoy eating them. Have you tried Built Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. Delicious. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs included 100% real chocolate, low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They are better. A typical candy bar could be anywhere from 2 to 300 calories. Just go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, just 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month in February, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they really are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Okay, so Saturday night, Karl-Anthony Towns is in the three-point contest for the first time in his career. Now, there were some great shooters in it. Obviously, Steph Curry did not shoot in it. Of course, Klay Thompson's not an All-Star weekend this year. So some of the guys who have been really good in past years, Joe Harris won recently. He's been out most of the season with an injury. But I mean, you still had Patty Mills. Obviously, Luke Kennard, I think, had the best percentage of anybody in the field this year. Patty Mills, Luke Kennard, Fred VanVleet, a lot of guys that Zach LaVine. But the craziest thing to me coming into this contest was that Karl-Anthony Towns had the longest odds. Our friends at Bet Online had Karl-Anthony Towns at plus 1,200 to win. That's 12-1 odds. And he was last. He was 8th out of the 8 guys. He had the longest odds to win. And if you just look at the percentages and consider nothing else, he's middle of the pack for that group. I mean, he's not at the bottom. He shoots both this year and for his career. Catch and shoot, you catch and shoot off the dribble, overall shooting percentage from 3. He was better than half of the guys in that field, both this season and for his career. So that was kind of bonkers in and of itself, and would have been a great value play. By the way, I did bet plus 1,200, and I obviously was very happy about that, about the result on Saturday for a lot of reasons. But so that was weird. And I understand the stigma. I talked about this a little bit on Friday leading into the weekend on Friday's show that big men don't win because you just assume, oh, they're bigger, they get tired, whatever. Well, I mean, big men don't win because big men aren't usually in it, because usually big men aren't really that good of shooters, right? Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Love. We can argue about whether or not to consider like Larry Bird or going. There's somebody else that is kind of, you could consider to be a big that's won previously. But Kevin Love was 10 years ago when he won the contest. Nowitzki was a couple years before that. And Love, no matter how you slice it, is the only center to have ever won the 3-point contest. Karl-Anthony Towns is the only center. I mean, Love obviously played a lot of center later on, but we're splitting hairs now. Towns is the only player who predominantly is a center to have ever won the 3-point contest. So Towns is middle of the pack in percentage. He's not at the bottom. The assumption is that bigs can't win the contest, but that is kind of a lazy thing to say, in my opinion. I talked about this on Friday. Towns has a quick release. He doesn't jump. He basically shoots a set shot most of the time when he shoots jumpers. So not leaving the floor is an advantage. You're not going to get tired as fast. It doesn't take as long. And he's all arms and wrists when he shoots. And that was always going to be an advantage for Karl-Anthony Towns. His numbers this year from the corners were down a little, but previously he was almost 50% from the corners, 3-point shooting from the corners for like a 3-year span just prior to last year. We all know at the top of the arc, he's deadly. And so it just seemed to me like, it would have been crazy to say he should have won it, but he certainly should have had the longest odds. So you better believe I placed a bet on plus 1,200 odds for Karl-Anthony Towns at betonline.net. And sure enough, Karl-Anthony Towns won it. I mean, he got 22 in the first round to finish third in the first round and get into the finals, and then dropped what was it, a 29 in the final round, which is the biggest ever score for the final round. Of course, the Mountain Dew balls were worth 3 points, which is a new thing. He made one of those, so that certainly helps. But if you just look at the number of balls, per rack and balls that he made, it's right up there with some of the best shooting performances in 3-point contest finals history. And to outshoot, a couple of guys, obviously Trae Young, I didn't mention him earlier. Trae Young was the guy, and then Luke Kennard that he had to beat in the final round, and he did that. So fantastic performance from Towns. The best shooting big man thing ever. I think people are starting to make fun of him a little bit less for that. I know he said that kind of off the cuff a couple of months ago. I talked about it on this show after the Wolves played the Mavericks, and I watched the Dallas Mavericks broadcast of the game. And Nowitzki and others were kind of poking fun at Towns for saying that. We've heard other people on national TV kind of, in tongue in cheek say, "Oh, best shooting big man ever." I'm just going to leave this here. You can go back and find the podcast. I wrote about it at Dunking with Wolves if you want my full thing. But I mean, Towns is statistically a better shooter than Dirk Nowitzki. He's a better 3-point shooter on a higher volume. His effective field goal percentage, true shooting percentage, all that stuff is higher. Um, and I don't really know what else to say about that. I understand that Nowitzki was far more revolutionary for the big man position or whatever. He was one of the first truly successful stretch bigs, certainly the first star to be a true stretch big, where that was his game at the NBA level. And it was mind blowing at the time. So yeah, props to Dirk for that. And I'm also not arguing that Karl-Anthony Towns is a better player than Dirk at this stage in Karl-Anthony Towns' career. He could be someday, sure. But Dirk Nowitzki is a top 70. We just saw him honored as a NBA 75 player, right? Um, but the making fun of the idea that Towns is the best shooting big man ever, and nobody's saying that he is because of the 3-point contest. It's the whole thing. He won the 3-point contest, and the numbers are all better on higher volume. So I'm not really sure how the argument could possibly be the other direction. But at any rate, if nothing else, it's a conversation to have, and that's where we're sitting here in 6-7 years into Towns' career. He's got plenty of time to prove his point here moving forward. Okay, quickly, the All-Star game on Sunday. Towns didn't play a whole lot, as a lot of times guys off the bench don't. He played 14 minutes, which was more than a couple of guys, more than Gobert, more than Levine on Team Durant. And Towns played well. I mean, 4 of 8 shooting. He missed. He was 1 of 4 on threes. He made 1 corner 3, had an offensive rebound and a putback, and then had 2 nice dunks. So he had 9.6 rebounds, 3 assists in 14 minutes. Played well in his limited minutes. Interestingly, Team Durant was coached by, unless I'm getting my coaches and their teams mixed up. I guess I am. They were coached by Eric Spoelstra. Monty Williams coached the other team. Devin Booker played 30 minutes for Eric Spoelstra's Team Durant. So interesting there. I don't know that Monty Williams would have played him that many minutes had he been, of course, his coach with the Suns was coaching the opposite team, Team LeBron in the All-Star game. But phenomenal performance from Steph Curry. Obviously, that's the story. 50 points. He shot 16 of 27 from 3. But he was 16 of 22. He missed his last 5 attempts trying to get the record, the points record of, Anthony Davis scored 52 a few years ago, 5 years back. But Curry, of course, got the record for 3-pointers made in an All-Star game, 16 of 27. He was 16 of 22 before missing his last 5 shots, which is absolutely insane. That's roughly 75%, which is clearly a very good free throw shooting percentage for many guys in the league. Just bonkers. And other guys, Joel Embiid was fantastic too. I mean, he had a case for Team Durant had won. He could have made a case for MVP, 36 and 10, and also made 5 threes, somewhat uncharacteristically. Giannis was very good, 30, 12, and 6. And I mean, a lot of good performances. LaMelo Ball was really good in this game too. Devin Booker. It was really fun. And I like the Elam finish to the game. I like everybody, trying to play to that point number. Of course, LeBron hitting the game winner in Cleveland was, Steph Curry to have a massive game in Cleveland, of course, where the Warriors defeated the Cavs in the finals a few years back. And then LeBron, everybody knows his history with Cleveland, hitting the game winner. Ton of fun. One of the better All-Star games in recent memory, in my opinion. And Towns played well. It was good to see him. Hopefully this is the last year that we have an Anthony Edwards-less All-Star game. I would completely expect him to be at the game next year. Now, LaMelo Ball was there this year. Obviously, Towns has now had three appearances under his belt. I mean, Andrew Wiggins started. By the way, Andrew Wiggins started only played 15 minutes, which is by far the least minutes played by any starter in this game. But Wiggs played well. He had a couple of threes, 10 points, and obviously happy for him. I said on the show before he should not have. He's not one of the 10 best players in the league, if that's what you want to call your all-star starters. But good for him that he's an all-star, and I'm glad that he's been successful in Golden State. But relatively quiet game from him in terms of as far as all-star starters go. Okay. That's all for All-Star Weekend. Overall fun. I like the tweaks to the format. If the Slam Dunk Contest would have been good, it would have been one of the better total All-Star Weekends in history, or in recent memory, I should say, because Rising Stars was entertaining. Obviously, Three-Point Contest skills was fun because it was different, and the All-Star Game itself featured the Curry and LeBron moments, and just a really close, fun finish to the game too. So, bravo to the NBA and the city of Cleveland for a really good weekend. Yeah, that's all I have on that. I want to close the show by talking Wolves and the month of February. What I said at the start of the month, what I thought they would do record wise, where they sit now, what's left remaining on the schedule, what I think they'll finish at here, sitting here now on February. What is this? February 21st. So we're going to do that here next. First, so let's talk about our friends at Bet Online. Football might be over, but basketball is full steam ahead, both pro and college hoops, of course. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach might land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, and Olympic coverage, which I guess the Olympics just wrapped up, but that's still your spot for anything sports betting and also just general information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the month of February and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, coming into the month, I predicted that the Timberwolves would go 7-5 in February, which would have put them a couple games. They were 25-25 coming into the month, but to this point, they've gone 6-3. So I picked a 7-5 month. They've gone 6-3, meaning, of course, they just have to go 1-2 this week to finish out the month where I thought they'd be. It's a really difficult schedule, though. We talked about this on Friday's show. They get Memphis at home on Thursday. Then they have Philadelphia at home on Friday. So home back-to-back against Memphis is what, number 3 in the West, and I believe Philadelphia is number 3 or 4 in the East right now. And so you're talking 2 top 4 teams. And then your last game of the month, they get Saturday and Sunday off. So 2 games off, 2 days off after the back-to-backs. They go to Cleveland Monday night to take on the Cavaliers. So going 1-2 over those 3 games would probably be a pretty reasonable result. And that would exactly equal what I predicted they would do this month, which would be a 7-5 record for the month of February. And they would be 2 games above 500 moving into March. Hard to complain about that, because then things get a lot easier. They get Golden State on Tuesday, which is the second night of a back-to-back. That'll be tough. But you get at Oklahoma City, 2 games against Portland, and then another Oklahoma City, and then at Orlando. So that's 5 consecutive games against 3 of the worst teams in the entire NBA. I don't want to make my full March prediction yet, but let's just say that the March schedule, outside of a couple of, there's just this weird run of back-to-backs at the Wolves, and I get they've had less earlier this season, but here they've got 3 back-to-backs in the next 2 weeks, and then they don't have any the rest of the season. It's very strange the way that this worked out. Like literally, they play the 24th and 25th, then they play the 28th and 1st, and then they play the 4th and 5th. So you've got 3 consecutive sets of back-to-backs, and they don't have another back-to-back. Or I'm sorry, they have one more back-to-back than the rest of the season, March 11th and 12th. It's the old at Orlando, at Miami, Florida two-step, if you will. But that's it. No more back-to-backs the rest of the regular season for Minnesota. So I guess if you get through this one, if you get through these 6 games, maybe, I don't know, 3-3 is probably reasonable. Maybe 2-4 is more realistic. I mean, you got to feel pretty good about yourself, because then things lighten up quite a bit. And again, in terms of the standings, the Timberwolves are a couple, I think 2.5 games behind Denver for the 6th spot. Of course, the 6th spot allows you to miss the play-in altogether. So they're 2.5 games behind them, 2 games ahead of the LA Clippers for the 7th spot. And you look at all the peripheral numbers, the point differential and stuff like that. The Wolves are about where they should be in the Western Conference, and they're comfortably in that 7th spot. And they're also done playing the Clippers too. They don't play the LA Clippers again this season. They struggled against them mightily early. And I believe, yeah, they won the last game against them, but they were blown out 3 times early this season. They're done playing the Clippers, and they do not have the tiebreaker. So they don't want to end up tied with the Clippers. They've still got Denver on the schedule, so we'll obviously monitor that tiebreaker as well. But all right, the rest of the week, I want to dig a little bit more into numbers on Tuesday and talk about notable numbers from the first half of the season. So we'll look at some individual numbers, some team numbers, compare last year to this year. That'll be Tuesday's show. Wednesday, we'll have a roundtable that we're doing with Locked On Nuggets, Locked On Mavericks, Locked On Lakers, and I think there's one more pod in there as well. We're going to just kind of take a step back, look at the entirety of the teams that are kind of in that play-in mix in the Western Conference, and what that means moving forward. You know, what teams are maybe more surprising than others, what teams we do and don't want to face in the playoffs. So that'll be Wednesday's show. We'll play that roundtable here on Locked On Wolves. And then Thursday, we'll get you ready for Wolves Grizzlies on Thursday night. So big week ahead. The Timberwolves get back in action on Thursday. That's all I have for today here on the show. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Wolves, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you for making us your first listen every day. Of course, free and available everywhere, including YouTube, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. You can subscribe anywhere. And of course, a reminder that we're your local experts at the Locked On Network on the biggest stories. No matter what, there's a Locked On show for your favorite team in your favorite city. Make sure you subscribe to that podcast. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.